Alright, what's up Twitch? What's up YouTube? I just gotta make sure this is running. Alright, it's Thursday, just a little past 11 p.m. Eastern, and this is BrackCast number 78. And I believe I'll be doing this on my own today, solo tonight. And that's totally cool. I feel like it's a good opportunity for me to just kind of speak openly about this particular topic. Tonight's topic is hitting rock bottom. My good friend Kyle actually was the one who shared this YouTube interview. This is between John Bernthal and Shia Labeouf. I highly recommend just, putting the time. It's a couple hours long, so it is a bit long, but I did find it to be pretty insightful. Sort of a good opportunity maybe to practice some empathy if you want to try and put yourself in his shoes. If you guys have kind of gone through anything in life where you feel you may have hit rock bottom, and you might even find that he might relate to what he's going through. I actually had no idea what had been going on with Shia LaBeouf in the last, I don't know, bunch of years. Honestly, I think with the whole like just do it, that whole video where he's just like flexing saying just do it, that was the most recent thing I kind of remember from him. But apparently he's been going through some transformations in the last couple years, particularly too there was some domestic violence and abuse with his former relationship with FKA Twigs. I didn't even know they were together. And then yeah, he had after watching this video, I guess I googled him a little bit. I checked on YouTube. There were also some domestic instances or like conflicts with him and his current wife, Mia. I forget her last name, but they go through it in this as well. And yeah, like, I don't know how many of you guys have kind of been a fan of Shia LaBeouf when he first came out. I forget what show he had, like a show where he was like a young star. But then yeah, Transformers kind of was like his breakout thing for his career. I really enjoyed his work with Transformers, Eagle Eye, and then he went on more of that like spiritual, serious roles with Honey Boy and the other Even Stevens. Is that? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's what it was. And you think he would take on more of like that comedic role as he grew up in life, but it was just interesting to kind of see how he's grown and I guess matured over the years. But then you'd think he was kind of in a good path to begin with, and then yeah, he had like this spiral within the last handful of years. According to this interview, it was just like a couple months ago or a few months ago where he's been going through like some dark shit in his life, and like where he had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, rehabilitation type of therapy sessions. And it was just a really interesting interview to watch, so I do highly recommend you guys take the time, watch it, especially again if you are going through something in life. If it was like a midlife crisis thing, maybe you had a recent breakup, or some really recent relationship conflict, it just might give you some kind of insight as to like maybe how you might want to deal with it if you feel like you're a little bit lost. I'm gonna play this one section in this interview, uh, specifically because he goes on to talk about basically the domestic violence that occurred between him and FKA Twigs, and she, I guess, publicly called him out on what was going on the abuse in their relationship, and he doesn't necessarily deny any of the accusations. He didn't agree with everything that was accused of him in terms of like the domestic violence, but he did acknowledge that he was abusive in the relationship. And then he also acknowledges later on too with his following relationship with Mia something, that forgive me, that he also had domestic conflicts with that. There's a video actually that was leaked on TMZ I found on YouTube afterwards, of yeah, there's like they had this huge argument. I think it was in Europe where he even says out loud in the camera that like if he had stayed and continued to endure whatever fight that they were going on, that he was going to kill her. And like it was always like a manipulative line of communication. You would read in the comments too that like he was kind of placing blame on her, like if he was to if he was to become physically violent with her at that moment in time, that it would be her fault. Like she was the line of action was leading him to down a path that would lead him to physical abuse. So it's very much very manipulative and like almost narcissistic behavior to put blame on someone else that you were abusing. So yeah, I guess on a more personal note, I can think back in my earlier relationships also when I was like, you know, like 10 years younger. Well, it wasn't that long ago, but a handful of years ago, all the way to like over 10 years ago, where I can see myself having similar kind of reactions to conflict. And yeah, just not being able to handle anger and like emotions. Basically, just not being able to handle your emotions. He goes on to talk about like becoming a man. Like, when do you really become a man in a relationship? But in this particular part, this is actually the most, besides the ending here where he talks about what's coming with Real Ones, John Bernthal show, this is the most viewed part of this interview. And this is actually the part two where I found I had my strongest emotional connection to this interview. I cried during this part of the interview. And after I play this, I do want to read a specific comment by one of the viewers, and then kind of like we can react to it together. But yeah, here is this portion of this interview where basically Shia Labeouf, maybe I can premise it a little bit, or maybe I'll go backwards if I'm a little bit too far into it. But he's going to his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings already. He's finally agreed to take part in this program. He's been convinced that it was going to be something that would help him. And basically, we've reached a point where he's supposed to attend these meetings where part of his family was going to be present. Like each member of this AA meeting had a friend or a family member come and speak on behalf of them. So anyway, I might have to like rewind this a little bit, but
wild people in this group, right? And they got people showing up for to your wife, your friends, whatever. It hit, and I wound up at this rehab, right, in Utah, and they do something called Family Week, and every week on a Sunday, everybody who's involved in the program has their family show up on these Skype calls, and everybody will show up in the same room, and your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your wife, your friends, whatever.
Just you and the people? Or
no, it's you, the whole squad of you that are in this group.
Right.
Like 12 of us in my class.
Everyone's family.
Everyone's family pops up on the screen. And week one, no one shows up. For me, no one. They got the calls. I know they got the calls, but no one showed up. My mother, my father, no one showed up. Manager, friends, no one showed up. Week two.
So this is, I mean, he's with other people in this meeting already who, you know, are also alcoholics, who are definitely, I would assume, a much lower, like, celebrity status than he is. And, he, you know, they've got whatever issues they've been going through, but they have individuals showing up for them in these calls. But, yeah, for the first week, no one shows up for Shia. So you kind of understand like how disconnected he was from, I guess, his family or his friends. He does go on to explain here too that he never knew what real love was prior to this experience. So that's kind of sad too to think about, that he, you know, even with his family and his friends, he never really experienced what true love was. Another one of, sorry, a movie that they were together, Shia and John Bernthal, was Fury, which is the tank movie. I really liked that movie too, and apparently they had a really good connection and bond there. That's how they built their friendship. So, yeah, I'll keep going.
Same thing. So I'm sitting in this room, and even the person who's like therapizing me, she's starting to feel like this. She's empathizing with where I'm at. Everybody else in the room, we got a dude who, like, you know, this isn't just alcoholics and shit. This is like fucking arsonists and like child predators and all kind of wild people in this group, right? And they got people showing up for them, and I don't have nobody showing up for me. And week 2, week 3, I'm there 90 days, so I'm there for a clip. And there comes a point where family week comes around, I say to my therapist, like, I'm not gonna go. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to subject myself to this shit. Like, I'm on a path, and, you know, let me just stay here. Like, I don't want to keep reminding myself of how fucked my situation is. And she says, no, I think you should show up this week. And I show up thinking, all right, my mom's gonna be on there. You know, my mom will be on. And Mia is on the screen. And, you know, like, you don't deserve that kind of shit. You know what I mean? You don't deserve that kind of shit. Like, I don't deserve that kind of shit. You know, I done put her through years and years of fucking nonsense, bro. Just like, and I don't have nothing to offer her either. You know what I mean? I'm in the middle of my shit. You know, I'm fucking like, I'm like 2 months into this program. You know, I don't even have nothing going on. I have nothing going on. I'm making this list. She's at the top of the list, but I'm not reaching out to her or nothing like that. And you heard her voice. Like, she's like a fucking angel, you know what I mean? Everybody does their shit, and I'm fucking gone, you know? And so they let her go first, because I can't even fucking believe. And they all know, because I ain't had no family show up for me. And she unmutes, and she's like, hi, Shia. You know, and it's like, she's prepping a movie. She ain't got no fucking time for this, you know? But she found time, and she said, hi, Shia. And we just smiled. We had nothing else to say. But she saved my fucking life, dog. Like, before the kid, before the job, before God, before any religion, before a laugh, before a laugh, before Bo, before a phone, before anything, was this woman's face. And there wasn't no promises made, wasn't no long conversation being had, nothing. Just her presence, the ministry of presence. Sometimes that's all you need to offer a person who's in a situation like that, is like, just to be present. And she was.
So, some context. I know you kind of just jumped into it from this point. And this is already an hour and a half into this. And he's already been... he's been, like, releasing so much already. John is, like, an awesome listener here. He doesn't speak so much in this interview. It's just really a platform and opportunity for Shia to speak out. A lot of people are mad at Shia because they don't believe that anyone, like... an abuser like that, domestic abuse, should be allowed to have a platform to speak. And man, just thinking about it too, like, I watched this without knowing what happened, so obviously it's a little biased, because I had already gone in without any judgment towards what he did. I only found out about what he did here. Had I maybe been keeping up with the news prior to this interview, watching this interview, I could have very much been a lot more judgmental to, like, yeah, you can't forgive an abuser, like, you can't trust an abuser. So again, there were a lot of accusations, and a number of them he did confirm, like, admit to, with his previous relationship with FK Twigs. And then he did have someone like a violent, abusive relationship with Mia, which is now his current wife, and now they have a daughter, I think a 5-year-old daughter. He did this movie also fairly recently. I think it's 2022 release. I didn't know about it until, again, after this interview. Pia, I think, like Padre Pia or Padre Pio, where he is a Catholic church priest. And I later found out that him playing that role, he has converted to Christianity, to Catholicism after that. And then, which has also led him down this path where he wants to heal and like become a better person, and be a better father. So it was interesting to listen to how he said he modeled his life prior to this experience. He said basically that before he knew about like what was important in life, he thought his purpose was like to just perform at the best of his like talent and ability as an actor. So whatever role he took on, he just kind of embodied the role, almost like method acting, and then he would just want to perform it to the best of his ability. And that's how he kind of gauged his worth, was the validation of like how good he was as an actor, the kind of feedback he got from his mentors, from his director, from other actors that he looked up to, obviously how well the film did too, like the reactions from critics and the audience. So, and I can see that, like you can kind of see like the kind of character he was. He was always kind of like out there and like aggressive and fierce. Again, the whole where he's flexing in front of the screen, and he's just like, just do it, get off your ass, do it. It was like motivational, but he would basically describe that kind of thing as it was performative. It was just, it wasn't for him, and it wasn't for like to serve really that like a sense of care, or that he wanted to serve people. And it wasn't until he went off on this retreat after AA and after all this rehab, where he went off and retreat with the monks, to study to be this role with Padre Pio, with to be a priest, where he started to realize like how much he learned from like the solitary living of these monks, how much he can really appreciate a lot more of the simple things in life outside of everything else, outside of the validation from other people. And it's just it's encouraging. It's encouraging because it kind of, as I watch this, I mean, he is a really good actor. Could he be acting this entire time? I would not just like to think that he was just acting throughout this interview. I do believe this was a very raw interaction between John and Shia. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this comment that this woman wrote. It is like, I think, yeah, this one here. Is it this one? Okay. No, this isn't the one. Oh, don't tell me I can't find that reaction. Oh, forgive me, guys. Give me a 1 second. It was one where like it was. Oh, that sucks. Maybe it was okay. Well, let's read some of these top comments here. Maybe I'll find it this way. I saw John posted this on his Instagram, and it was interesting to see how triggered people were in the comments section, outraged that an abuser was being given a platform. This is being commented by a woman. I highly doubt that these people watched the interview. Personally, as a woman who experienced physical and emotional abuse at the hands of a man, I found this conversation healing, and I'm incredibly grateful you shared this. Okay, this was actually the comment that I was looking for. I thought it was longer. 8.4 thousand likes. So, this is masculinity. This is how we heal masculinity. When men are given safe spaces to be radically authentic, raw and vulnerable, they heal, and we all heal. I don't wish for the demise of the man who abused me. I wish for his redemption. I wish for him to heal, so that he can be a better man and treat women with the love and respect that they deserve. Can't wait to see more open and raw conversations like these. I love this comment. Like, it's almost, when you read it out like that and the way she phrased it, it's like, it's kind of like it was a no-brainer. Yeah, empathy, compassion. But when you hear, maybe if you were to like I said, with all the, like she said here, with how triggered people were in the comments section, they just see the face value of what he did. And some things we think we take in life too is like unforgivable. The kind of transformation I went through years ago too was like, I was tired of hurting people that I loved. You know, like, there's this transition you become when you're growing up. You know, he talks about it in this interview too, about when do you become a man. And yeah, I guess this is more of like that masculine kind of conversation, but this is like, when do you become an adult, like a, you know, truly like a man, like even like adult, like as a woman. But like, is it when you get your driver's license? Is it when you can finally drink at 19 years old? Is it when you get a job? Is it when you hit your first $100,000 or your first $1,000,000? Like, what do we gauge in today's society anyway? It is like, when do you become a man? And there's different things in different cultures. Some of it you hit it when you're 12 years old, 13 years old. Some of it you hit when you're 15, 16. Other people say it's 18 years old legally. But, you know, what Shia would say here in his interview was that it's when you become accountable and responsible for someone else. So it's almost like when you become a father. I mean, that could be very late for a lot of people, and in a sense, I don't quite disagree with it. I wouldn't even put it straight to the responsibility of being responsible for someone else, but I think it is when you become accountable, when you finally, like, are able to look at what you've done with your life and the way you carry yourself and your actions, and understand, like, that you are responsible for all your decisions and your actions. And there's a sense of, like, not just accountability, but like the consequences, understanding the consequences of your decisions and your actions and the way you live your life. So I don't know how else I can express just, I think, how valuable and how important this interview is for just anybody to watch. And thank you, Kyle, for sending the link in Brack for us to watch this, or at least I watched the whole thing, and I do have hope for him. I don't think he was just doing this for the sense of redemption on a public scale for people to look at him as if he's like become a better person. I do think this was something he needed. He actually needed this for his own personal healing, and in a sense too, it's going to help him and help others, just watching him kind of go through his pain, his process of his pain, and then his process of transformation, and then leading to a point where he basically reaches, yeah, his turnaround point, his rock bottom. So like, I'm curious. I mean, you know, I'm here by myself right now in the pod. If you want to comment now, that's fine. Or even if you guys want to just watch this podcast later and you want to talk about if you feel like you've experienced rock bottom. And this made me start to look back in my past and understand and try to figure out which part was my rock bottom too. And for years, like at least a decade. Okay, maybe not a decade, because that doesn't actually amount to the time. Almost a decade. But I would have thought my rock bottom was when I was 31. So at 31 years old, maybe some people might also look at this as like midlife crisis or something, or quarter life crisis. But I had been in a relationship that was 7 years long. And prior to that, I was in a relationship that was 4 years long. And there was not a lot of time in between those two. So for the last 11 years, from age 20 to 31, I had been in long-term relationships. And, you know, I had my own kind of like perceived beliefs growing up, being born into Catholicism, having to go through the expectations of what your parents had for you, or what your peers or your friends or even people in school. I had, I guess, a lot of pressure in high school too, just of like what people expected me to achieve because of, you know, level of my academics and my my grades. And I would go into university. It was my first time being away from home, so I had like full independence and autonomy for myself, and I blew it. Basically, I went off to University of Waterloo, and I played basketball like several hours a day, and I played Counter-Strike several hours a night, and I wasn't doing my homework. I wasn't motivated. I wasn't inspired to do my work, my homework, and I suffered for it, and I ended up having to. Eventually, it would hit me, bite me in the ass. I was kicked. I was given a choice to be kicked out of my program, but I could have tried to go for my program again, but if I went for it again and I failed again, then I'd run the risk of being kicked out of Waterloo completely, rather than just being able to switch programs or switch courses. I'm sitting here right now at this moment, and I'm like, wow, am I really just gonna be like so open with like the rest of the world about what happened to me in university? But why not? Like, I've got nothing to lose here at this point. I've reached this point in my life where I've fully accepted what happened to me. So let's switch back to this. So yeah, I ended up switching out of engineering, went into economics, figured out how to study, because I realized like it's like, okay, I can't just like coast through the rest of university anymore. So I finished university with an economics degree, and then I had, throughout all of university, I was in a relationship, and at the end of university, that relationship ended. So that was like a 4-year relationship, and that finished. And I was like kind of like a turning of a new leaf. I thought I was like a new person. I was figuring out like my path, still trying to figure out who I am as a person. I think that's part of also when you become a man, when you kind of just know who you are, when you're not trying to define who you are anymore and trying to figure out what your core values are, or what your like goals are, or like even just figuring out the path or direction you want to go in life. It's when you finally like make that decision for yourself and define it for yourself. Because before that, you're still trying to figure it out. You're still trying to find yourself, trying to yeah, define who you are as a person. But you know, when you graduate, you're like basically mentally, you're at the peak of like your confidence. You think you're ready for the world, that you can handle anything that the world throws at you. You're probably in like peak physical form at that point in your life, for most part. And if you graduated with like a relatively high academic honors, or you feel like you've got that higher confidence, you feel like you're ready to take on your career, start your career, whatever like that. And like I said, shortly after that 4-year relationship, I ended up starting my next relationship. So that was also feeding part of the ego too. And we would end up being together for 7 years. But this is me trying to like get out of school, figure out who I am as a person. I was like dancing at the time. I was singing at the time. I wasn't necessarily looking for a job that was going to be economics related. I was definitely not looking towards the engineering path at this point anymore. But I had like a dance kind of background coming out of University of Waterloo with like the hip hop club. So I was trying to become a dancer, instructor. Anyway, you build your life. You start to, think you have a plan for things. And I thought by 25 years old, this is when I was 2021. And I thought by 25, 5 years after this relationship that I've welcomed into my life, that I would follow the route that my parents did, where get married by 25, have a kid by 30 at least, or have at least one kid by 30. And then like that was going to be like the defining thing for my life. I would have a house and build a family. Everything else was just kind of like figure itself out at this point. This is what like I guess the dream I had in, or not like a dream life, but it's just like what I had projected for myself coming out of high school, knowing how my parents were, how my family was, and then you just kind of roll with it. I would struggle trying to find a career. I was able to find at least a corporate sales job that would help me pay my debt, student debt, OSAP, help me pay off my car. And I felt, again, invincible. Like, wow, I worked my ass off. I worked like 4 or 5 jobs at the time, paid off my debt in 2 years, OSAP and my car. And that's when I decided, all right, let's quit this corporate job, and I was going to become a photographer full time. And was going to be self-employed and pursue this entrepreneurial thing. And again, I was super confident, built it, and over time, I think with the paths of this relationship, we kind of started to deviate, started to drift apart, resentment started to grow. Here I am too, actually, at the age of 28, I ended up deviating from the path of the Catholicism. I kind of had the time to rethink about my faith and like what I wanted to believe in. I started to question my faith. There were certain things I studied in school that made me really question Catholicism, and I ended up going away from Catholicism. And then I was welcoming more and more like this agnostic atheist belief, and I was okay with it too. You know, that's another podcast example where I talk about like the difference between faith and religion, and like, yeah, I felt that I was still a faithful individual even though I wasn't atheism best religion ever. Thanks, dude. I don't know about that. I wouldn't even count atheism. Oh, actually, I guess it is. I don't like actually being associated with atheists because that's again a category. I don't believe you need to be categorized with based on your faith. Faith is personal. But basically, by 31 years old, we've reached 7 years in this relationship. We become resentful of each other, rude to each other. We weren't communicating. We weren't nurturing those things that were important. And why? Because like we never really felt we had to learn that stuff. You were together at such a young age where you felt invincible and like at the peak of your game, and then you start to realize life is hard, and it just naturally gets harder as you get older in your 20s, and then your paths. If your paths start to deviate from each other, if you don't know how to nurture that relationship outside of the comforts and the fun and like the, you know, what you think is actually holding you together, if you don't know how to handle and communicate through the hard stuff, you're fucked. Like, you're not gonna last through that, and you're still only in your 20s. You know, we're children, obviously, up until we're 18. But when you hit 18, you're just not all of a sudden you're an adult and you just know shit. Yeah, you people will give you the benefit of the doubt that you can make responsible decisions for yourself, like the age of consent, right? All that stuff. But still, it doesn't mean you have that level of maturity where you know what you're doing, where you know your shit. So at 31 years old, at this point in my career, I think it was like maybe like 8 to 10 years into my like entrepreneurial destination, I was having a hard time with my career. I had been a photographer for that long, but if you think about my age range from like my mid-20s to my late 20s, it kind of made sense. A lot of my friends and people I knew from a personal kind of connectivity or like network, that I could shoot their weddings. That there was a lot of people getting married around that time. I knew them through my own kind of personal network. So that's what brought me that kind of like network so that I can get these jobs. But it was reaching its cap at that point. People were already getting married, and I thought that I would move downtown in an area, Liberty Village, where I thought a lot of like single young people would want to like start to get married, and I would take advantage of the demographic. Never did. I basically wasted a year renting downtown in an expensive area where I didn't do anything with it. And I didn't really know what I was focused on, honestly. Like, I still didn't really know who I was as an individual. I was coming out of the last 3 years trying to redefine my faith. So, like, my core values, too. Like, was I really having open conversations with my family or my parents? No. I'm 31 years old now at this point, right? You'd think you'd know who you are at 31. My dad, when he was in his 30s, he already had 3 kids. His life was already defined at who was, like, he was a father. He and my mom had already decided to move from the Philippines, come to Canada, and, like, this was the route that he was going to take for his families to give us a better life, better opportunities here. There it is again, what Shia was saying earlier. It's like when you become responsible for others, when you become accountable for your decisions. Not even that, but we were dependent on like this decision was going to shape and direct our lives as their children. So at 31, definitely he was far more a man than I was at 31. He's now single, overweight, jobless, basically broke, having to restart my whole life, broken from a 7-year relationship that failed, not even understand like, oh man, like how I haven't even been on a date, like a date where you like try to meet someone and like start a relationship in 11, 12 years. And I'm thrown back where like these apps are just like really starting to launch. Tinder was a big thing. It was like the main big thing at that point. And it was still not just the hookup app. Like Tinder was taking over Plenty of Fish and Lava Life and eHarmony, where those websites were trying to profile you. It was becoming more of this app. Apps were like becoming a thing. I remember I had my first what is it called? iPod video, I think. It wasn't even, I don't even know if iPhones existed at this point. 2014? Was there an iPhone by then? I had an iPod video. iPods were just switching from the music shuffles and iPod little music players to video iPods into like actual like did they I don't know, iPads came out 2007. Okay, well, I guess it was just an iPod video, or if that's what it was called. It was like a full screen thing, but it was only this big. I see the accountability thing as not just kids. Could be anyone who's dependent. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not necessarily just becoming a father. It could be in your relationship, or it could be if you take on it more of a professional role. It could be like people that you become responsible for as like your employees, but it's basically where your life isn't just all about you. It's not just about you anymore. Anyway, and I'm not even gonna say so that is the definitive meaning of becoming a man either. Like, but there's something in there that needs to change in your mind. Part of it, I think, also is like the whole validation and caring about what other people think. So at 31, it was like a reset of my life. I started to make bad choices. I went through a dark path. And I look back and think that's rock bottom for me. And if you looked at it like on a piece of paper, like where I was in my life, like almost broke, career was struggling. I was also overweight because I became very complacent in that relationship. Just broke up with 7-year relationship. I'm single now. I had no money, so I had to go back home and kind of like reset and like start saving up. First thing I could work on was my fitness. You'd think that's like rock bottom, and then like there's nowhere to go but up. And that's true. Like you just gotta like dig your head down and like grind, and like you gotta like work your way back up. But it wouldn't be, at least when I look back now, it wouldn't be until like 6-7 years later where I made a conscious decision that I'm like, something's wrong that I need to fix about myself. Yeah, 31, but I was still like, what's wrong with the world? Or is it God? Or is it because I was atheist? Or what can I blame as what put me in this position at 31 years old? Yeah, I could blame of course I blame myself too. It's like, yeah, I was complacent. I wasn't communicating. But it was like, I still felt like partially like I was the victim. And like, I mean, that can only get you so far. Or not far at all. I would end up in other relationships after that, but I never took on like the actual root of what was going on inside me, of what caused my like breakups or what caused my conflicts in my previous relationships. Like rage was one. I have another video where I talk about my rage and when I went to therapy. But like outside of, I don't want to get too much into this, but into like what happened to me, but I look back and see the turning point in my life wasn't 31. That wasn't the turning point it was rock bottom. But I don't think necessarily that anyone who's rock bottom is ready for the transformation to just like fix their shit. Because a lot of people just stay there. Or maybe you start building a little bit, but what you're building on is shit. So it doesn't last and you just fall back down. So as I said, went into other relationships. They failed after a few months. Went into another relationship. Failed after a month or so. I would be on this like little rise career-wise. Maybe a rise physique-wise. Wealth-wise. But I'm not like really building who I am as a person. I wasn't really defining. I was still trying to figure it out. part of that too, I think, is like if you're single and you're looking for a partner, like you don't know what you want either. If you don't really know who you are, like how are you going to know what you want? I think the scariest thing is being complacent when you know it's rock bottom, thinking can't get any worse. Yeah, I mean, that's true. There's obviously validity to that. If you acknowledge that where you are is rock bottom and it can't get any worse, you would hope that your mindset is in this pact, like you're going to make changes that's going to bring you back up. You would hope. But it's easy to stay there. It's easy to just constantly place blame on exterior factors and make yourself out to be the victim, and you just kind of wait. You're waiting for something else. 5 years later, 6 years later, I was in another, at this point I was near the end of a 2.5-year relationship. This 2.5-year relationship I thought was going to be like, it was actually life-changing in the sense of like, I'm got 36, 37. You'd think I should know who I am by this point. I should know. Yet I still didn't address any of the shit that happened before that. That sounds like giving up. Yeah, and so like, because of that, I had no basis on like what I was building this, my foundation was shit. And it failed again. And at this point I was tired of, as I said in my other, like losing the people, hurting the people that I loved. It always led to me losing things that I valued for myself. And I really had to look back and understand like the pattern in my life was the constant seeking of validation from others. Whether it be parents, your partner, your friends, employers, or whatever it is. Even in the social media sense, like these likes or whatever. A lot of attention was placed on like my value was I perceived my value as how others perceived my value. And I never wanted to define it for myself. And, a lot of people at this point people suggested maybe I should have done couples therapy with the 7-year relationship or the 4-year relationship, or like individual therapy. But anyway, at this point I was like, I just lost this 2.5-year relationship. No one's telling me to go to therapy anymore. Like, I'm single now, right? I'm back to being alone. I at this point I moved out of my house. I was, building in my career. I was living on my own. And I felt alone. And that was the turning point. Maybe that was still rock bottom. Maybe I had 6-7 years of like mental, emotional rock bottom, thinking that I was building something out of it, but it was all superficial stuff. Just like physical. Maybe I was just, wealth, maybe body, but like emotionally, internally, like mentally, was I really working on myself? Nah. I at this point, I made it through life just knowing that I had certain things that were expected of me, so then you do them. If you have a responsibility that's given to you by your teacher, by your employer, by your parents, by your partner, you meet them, get validation from the fact that either you performed well or you didn't. Like I said, Shia Labeouf was like very performative. It was all he seeked validation based on his value was just perceived by how other people viewed his performance, and that's what I did too. Maybe that's why I just like related to this interview so much, because he reached a point where basically he no longer gives a shit what other people think, and that the way I can say that statement can sound very easy, because a lot of people be like, yeah, I don't give a shit what other people think anymore, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've hit that point where like, oh, I know who I am, I know what I want, I know my purpose in life, I got this thing figured out. A lot of people just don't give a shit what other people think because they just don't give a shit what other people think, but then it doesn't necessarily think that they care about themselves either. So it's not just, that's not the whole answer. But it was at that point where I was like, I took responsibility for my loss. And I took full, actually, blame as to why I was there at 36, 37, whatever it was, 37 years old, why I was alone again. I honestly felt that after that 2.5-year relationship, I'm like, this is fucked up. Like, how can I fuck up again? Like, from 31 till now, 6 years, I was building myself and I fucked up again. Why? So it's like, I can't do this by myself. I'm not saying therapy is the answer for everybody. It's not, because it might not be, but it might be. I'm just saying, like, for anyone else who's not tried it, but you're like in this state of mind where you're like, what the fuck is wrong with me? It's not to say something is necessarily wrong with you, but you just don't know. You just haven't figured it out, and that's okay. That can happen at any point in life. Some people can figure it out by 20. Some people might even figure it out by like 14, 16, 27, whatever it is. There's like different tiers of, like, I guess, figuring out, you know, career-wise, life-wise. I'm trying to reach this. It's like a deeper figuring out part of your life, guys. Like, you could be in like a long relationship. Maybe you've already proposed, you're like engaged, or you're married and you have a house, and you think like you've got all your life figured out. But then these are for the moments where you're in your life and you look at yourself and you're like, is this where I'm supposed to be? It's possible for people to never figure it out. That's fine. I mean, I'm not gonna say that's fine, but like, it's very true. Like, there's fact to that. That's like me every day. I mean, yeah, there's a certain degree of that where you can probably ask yourself and live with that every day, and that's okay too. But like, you know, it doesn't reach to a point day where you feel like you can just stop and give up, though. You know, like in this interview, guys, I just highly recommend check out the interview. You can listen to him basically, where it's like he didn't believe anyone else talking about like how his AA meetings were gonna help, how his rehab was gonna help. He's like, it's like, fuck you, I tried this, man. It's like, I'm not gonna do this again. And he basically had to be humbled. He had to be humbled before he could realize, like, that he could, like, fix himself. He had a lot of ego. I had a lot of ego. I was extremely arrogant, overly confident, thinking I was invincible, I could take on the world, I could do anything. He was like that as well, where he basically said, like, he thought he was God. He got to a level in his acting, or he was so critically acclaimed that he thought he was the shit. Like, he could do anything, and like, no one could tell him better than what he already knew for himself. Like, he was like an expert already and all that. There's a huge ego to that, very narcissistic kind of too. But some people might reach that and might stay there for the rest of their life, and they might be super successful, and like, that's how they live their life. Am I gonna say like that person didn't live their life to their fullest? No, that might happen to some people too. But I mean, it might not be for you. I'm just offering kind of something, let's say, to someone who might feel lost. If you start to look back at your life, like, what if I made that decision that would have deviated to this? Or what if I went this and I went that way? I thought about it just, again, after watching this interview. I brought myself to like looking back at other old relationships. If, let's say, I went to university and I did my work. Sorry, Data, I'm going to read that comment. I think for me, it's more of being scared to give up, so I keep chugging along. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I had the spare time from not doing what I do on a daily basis. Yeah, but what you do on a daily basis doesn't have to be the same thing all the time either. But you've made the choice. That's another part of this thing about, like, when people say, man, I can't do that. Oh, you watch somebody is like, wow, you do all that? Man, I can't do that. I've come to the understanding that there's nothing really that anyone can't do. It's just they don't want to do it. They don't want to put themselves through something where they're gonna have to do it. They just don't want to. You can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. But if you don't want to, you're not gonna do it. Day, you want to. Everything that you're making on these decisions for your life to chug along is because you want to do it. And that's great. That's fine. I started to think back in university, like, what if I didn't play 6 hours, 7 hours of basketball a day? I didn't play 4, 6 hours of Counter-Strike every day, every night. And I actually did my work. I did all the homework. Paid attention in class, took the notes, and I did well. And I graduated systems design engineering. And I'm now probably living that life. I'd be living that life probably more wealthy than I am now. I likely would have probably met someone in the program or someone in my career at that point, married, already multiple kids at this point. I lived the life that I had already originally projected for myself when I was high school, of like, yeah, like by 25 I'd be married. By 30 I'd have at least have one kid, living in a house, building the family, all that stuff. If I did that. Now, I look back at that and I don't say, would I be happier? I used to say that. Would I have been happier? Chances are I'd be happy. Just a different level of happy. I'm happy right now. I'm cool where I am. And like, guys, you've talked about it too. I'm totally cool with being the cool uncle, solo, alone the rest of my life. Yeah, like I get it. Like that's part of it too. I don't have a problem with being alone, like single in the rest of my life. It's not like a problem. It's not what I want. But it's not a problem. It's not like I'm going to feel like, oh, I failed my life because I couldn't find someone. It doesn't mean I'm not going to look, though, right? Those are very different types of things. For me, I feel like they like the idea of it. LOL. Won't take action because they don't want to try. What if I didn't play 3,000 hours of Final Fantasy? Daydreaming is enough. So there's this, yeah, I think I mentioned it too in another pod, where there's like this new Netflix series where this woman, it shows this woman, she's in a relationship in high school, I think, and she gets pregnant. And this is like the pivotal, the fork in the road moment of her life. So this is when the show splits. She keeps the kid, stays with the guy, or she has an abortion and pursues her career. And then they follow her life. Both of those paths for the rest of the show. Or at least it's an idea for what's coming out. It's not out yet. It's like a trailer. I like that. I like that premise because it's not gonna pick one over the other. It's gonna show ups and downs, roller coasters. Maybe some points in that life of one path is gonna be way better than the other, and then the opposite. Maybe they're both. Maybe the other one's better than the other, or maybe they're both super high at the same time, or they're both super low at the same time. Who knows what they're gonna do with the show? Something tells me dynamically they're gonna like shift it back and forth. I look at that. I'm 30. I'm 40 now. I'm 40. I almost forgot. I'm 40 now. So, at this point, my dad at 40 would have had 3 children in the double digits by now. 10 up to 15 years old. They've already moved to Canada and, took all their savings and like what they've built in the Philippines and moved to Canada. That life, I have to like model it. That's probably where I'd be. Versus, or like, taking on this family, trying to like make a plan for everyone to grow. But here I am instead, single, living alone, renting still. But I mean, it's a work in progress. It's a very different economy and like lifestyle these days. But like, I'm good. I'm confident still. I'm hopeful, positive. Yeah, everyone's gonna have their lows too. Just like in that show, that's probably gonna show some lows on both sides of the story. There's probably gonna be some times where you might have resentments with your life, or you're just not happy enough with what you've got. You feel like you should have done more. You could do more, and yeah, I have those too. There's obviously some moments, some lonely moments, where you have weakness, where you're weak. But like, we all have that. We're all gonna get that. I think. I feel like I'm a little all over the place here, but from what I've taken from this, from this interview with Shia, he is now 36. I think he's 36 years old. Shia. 36 years old. And he's starting to figure his shit out. 36. I was 37. Also, when I went to therapy and like found out the root of like all the rage and all this stuff and this like trauma from my childhood growing up and like figuring out like the puzzle pieces of what led me here. So it's not like ridiculously crazy. If you find yourself in your 30s, mid to late 30s, and you feel like, man, midlife crisis, or I don't know, you buy a motorcycle and all that stuff, it's different from that. I'm actually talking about where you might have felt like you had a grasp on your life and it was completely defined, and you were just totally knocked down and you had to start from the bottom. That kind of rock bottom that I'm talking about. Hitting rock bottom in that sense. Because you felt you had your shit together, and then reality, life, God, whatever it is that you want to think about and how you want to model your life was like, nope. And you just come crashing down, and you're like, you weren't building shit. You didn't figure that out. Here's another shot. You might even look at it as like, here's another try. But some people might be just totally crumbled by that and never bounce back from that. You know, I have hopes. I have hopes for Shia, the way he talks now about his kid, about his relationship with Mia. There's a recent thing, altercation, I would say. It was about Don't Worry, Darling. I think that was the movie. So Olivia Wilde directed this movie. She, put out there in public forums that she fired Shia Labeouf, and he responds with a personal letter that he sends to her, talking about like his process, his lifestyle now, what he's learned, his family, and there's another cool one too. If you guys want to look that up, I'll have all the links in the description, basically of a letter that he basically writes back to Olivia Wilde. I didn't know about this at all, but there was a really good analysis video of his letter, and just basically it just shows like how his mind has shifted from who he was and like to who he wants to be, and who he wants to like now who he wants to represent as Shia Labeouf now into the world. Like he doesn't want to be someone who's just about the performance of his like of how well he could do his job as like an actor. Now he wants to be known as like, how can he help other people? And it's weird. Maybe this is a common theme. I'm coming across a lot of these things. Jet Li, another one where I just randomly watched this video of like what happened to Jet Li. There was a hiatus, but from Mulan and before that. For those who don't know, there was a tsunami, and he was involved with that tsunami, and that's why he kind of gave him a reality check. He did Mulan, but then since then he's just really been doing a lot of like charity work. So another one there too, where it's just like people like, how can I help others? How can I service others? How could he be of like a positive force in the world to other people? This has been something I've kind of wanted to do for a very long time. Like, this was like my mantra. I was like, I want to make a positive impact on the lives of everyone that I meet. I thought this YouTube would be a way of doing that, and it is. But quite frankly, I don't remember that all the time, guys. Like, I'm human too. Like, it's not like I always am benevolent, be like, oh, how can I help others? It's not always like that. But like, I think hopefully, altruistically, is that the word? But I do hope that at some point we all reach this point in our lives where we really just figure out who we are as individuals, where we don't feel like we need to change for anyone anymore. And that's not out of like stubbornness or like arrogance, but like where you can take pride in who you are as a benevolent or like good person, not just pride in being a bad person. That's just destructive. But like where you can look at that, you define who you are, you know what you want, and then you just like, you understand that every day is just an opportunity for you to pursue that. Day, you're doing that. Every day you're chugging along. You say there's a fear involved, like you wouldn't know what to do if you didn't. I mean that's one way of putting it. Not necessarily feel like, oh man, if I didn't do every day, if I don't live every day with purpose, then it's like, what would I do? Well, yeah, you wouldn't know. You'd be lost. But if you've defined your purpose as chugging along, doing your work, earning money, making a living, providing for you and your relationship, or building towards your future, that's all good. Like that's all good. Anyway, I feel like I've spoken long enough. How long has this been? This stream has been, where's my counter? 59 minutes and 15 seconds. So I don't know if I've really like shed any kind of wisdom to anybody here today who's watching, but if anything, I just highly recommend you can sit down and watch these two, as you would think, very masculine type individuals man, John Bernthal, tough guy. He's a, you know, listen and be empathetic to his friend, who is basically super vulnerable, who understands he's done shit, and like, and he's like really putting an effort really to like to change. And I do that's what I appreciated about that comment. I don't necessarily would say this is masculinity. I think that's empathy. It's not. I wouldn't call this masculine or feminine. Some people might view him crying in front of this interview as feminine or like weak. Some people might view his crying as an act. He's just faking it so that he can get sympathy and like he can get back his like positive viewership. But I think this is like two friends, you know, just being like it's called Real Ones. So I might actually start watching more of these Real Ones interviews. I'm interested to see like really where this the kind of dynamics between these people are, like what their stories are, because this one was really good. So thanks again, Kyle, for sharing this. Again, I'll have all the links in the description. I'll have this interview in the link in the description. I'll have the analysis of Shia Labeouf's letter that was sent back to Olivia Wilde about being fired from Don't Worry Darling. And yeah, even the whole like what the heck happened to Jet Li, I'll put that there too, because I just thought it was like really cool to see how specific events in people's lives, whether it be life threatening, whether it be rock bottom, whatever it is how you want to view it, but there were some pivotal moments in people's lives that led them to take on this more benevolent or like caring route where they want to like help people and serve people. So if you take anything from that, at least maybe you find it entertaining. Maybe you find it like inspirational, motivational. But I wish you guys all the best. I hope this was at least enjoyable to listen to. Thank you for coming and taking part in the comments, guys. Mike, Day, thank you. And yeah, I'll see you guys. Yeah, hopefully next Thursday with different topic. We can maybe share in some views and topics again. I think I've said enough. I don't even understand how I was able to talk for that long, but peace out. See you next week. Thanks for watching, guys. And have a great week. Comment below on anything. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Peace.